Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, what's going on today? How are you?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Good. We were joking off air that it's a busy day here at EPL.
Yes.
Today, as we're recording this, it's on September 29th. This is actually the day of our big event with Terry O'Reilly, who we just had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we're all gearing up for that tonight. What will, I'm sure, be an awesome event, and hopefully, for those of you listening to this episode in the future, you enjoyed the talk.
Yeah. And if you missed it, you can go back and listen to our recent episode where Bryce and I talked to Terry O'Reilly and got to hear that insider information on what Bob Newhart is really like.
Yeah. So happy to hear such a great guy. So Caroline, obviously Thanksgiving is just a few days away, and things are tough out there right now. There's a lot of, you turn on the news or just anything. There's a lot of negative news lately, and today when we were thinking of episode ideas, we thought, let's maybe go for a lighter episode and maybe talk about some things that we're thankful for.
Yeah, our last episode was about political thrillers, and we spent some time in that headspace. And coming out of that, I think it's good. It's always fun to think about the things you really like. That's why we do this podcast. We get to talk about the titles and the items and share that with people who listen to the show. And I think it will be a good idea to talk about the things that we are really thankful for. What's out there that makes us happy and we're grateful for.
Hmm. And I'm grateful for us to always be able to get awesome guests on the show, and very thankful today we have coming back one of my favorite guests we have on Overdue Finds, manager of the Strathcona branch, Katie Turzansky. Katie, how are you today? Welcome back.
Hello, I'm so glad to be back. I'm doing well. I am happy to be talking about uh, this today because I love heading into the season where both the fall season and Thanksgiving and everything that comes with that, and also just it kind of kicks off a holiday season, right? So I'm excited to be here talking about this.
Yeah, it's a good time of year.
Yeah, my wife's already asking me about when the Hallmark Christmas movies are starting up. So
It's before Halloween. It's gotta
I
be
know.
soon. It's gotta be
Oh, I know.
soon. But you don't wanna skip the fall ones because they all have, the pumpkin festivals and, like, the cider contests and the harvest dance. Those ones are also very good. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've definitely been watching my fair share of those lately. So yeah, and of course, Katie, you were actually last on not that long ago. We were on our a popular Schitt's Creek episode. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's always
It's
great to
about
have
a
you back.
year ago. I mean,
Has
time is
it been a
weird,
year
but it was
already?
about a year ago.
Oh my,
Yeah.
wow. Years flying by. So it has been a long time. So welcome back. Before we talk about our overdue finds picks, I want to remind everyone that tickets are now available for our next virtual forward thinking speaker series event. You won't want to miss Michael Landsberg's presentation called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me. Michael Landsberg was the outspoken host of TSN's Off the Record, and from watching his show, you'd never guess that he was battling mental illness and depression for most of his life. Landsberg will share the story of his own battle with mental illness, as well as the unexplored stories of some of the world's most recognizable sports figures to show us that recovery, strength, and hope are possible in some of our darkest times. Tickets are available now at epl.ca/speaker series. This event is presented in partnership with our friends at the Edmonton Community Foundation. Caroline, we're going to talk about Michael Landsberg a little bit later on in the show, but I'm really looking forward to his talk. I've been online watching some past episodes of Off the Record, so it's going to be a really great talk.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think you know him from his work with sports. I was more familiar with his social media presence and as a mental health advocate. So I think he will be someone that people will really get a great presentation from.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into our recent Overdue Finds picks. Katie, what have you been enjoying lately?
I'm just about done reading the book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon. And this is nonfiction. It's a bit of a mix, it's sort of an essay style, a mix of memoir pieces as well as nonfiction about being fat in an anti-fat world and an anti-fat culture. Aubrey Gordon was a community organizer for many years and has moved into writing. She has a regular column in Self magazine, and also has a podcast herself called Maintenance Phase. And I have just been loving this book. I have found it empowering. I have found it perspective changing, which can be somewhat life changing. And that sounds over the top, but it really, I think, is I can't recommend it enough. I think is recommended for both people who identify as fat and people who don't. I think can have a lot to learn about how we see and treat bodies in our culture, and it just is um, some real opportunity for reflection there. I've really been enjoying it.
Sounds like a really important book anyway. And I won't. I'm trying to remember which show I was. I was some old sitcom, and there was a person on there who was overweight, and of course they go for the fat joke. Unfortunately, and I'm watching this, and I'm just like this is awful. Like back in the day, that it was hilarious, and well, it was considered to be hilarious, I guess. But yeah, there's still, it seems like there's still a long way to go, but books like that kind of really help change that conversation.
For sure. She tackles some of the pop culture stuff and a bunch of other things. And she also talks about how, while, yeah, we've made some steps in the right direction, um, there have been studies done about implicit bias, and anti fat bias is one of the few that's actually increased in recent years instead of decreased. So there's definitely still lots of work to be done. So I recommend the book.
I'm online in waiting for it. I have my name down on hold, and I can't wait to read it. I'm really looking forward to it, and having some of my understandings, my assumptions, the things that I've believed my whole life. I'm ready to shake that up. So I'm looking forward to it.
Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
This week I'm going to talk about Mayor of Easttown, which
Oh,
is an HBO miniseries that aired earlier this year. EPL has both the series on DVD as well as the soundtrack. So if you just want to feel like your life is an HBO miniseries, you can do that, I guess. I don't know if you do, but it's an option. Have either of you seen Mayor of Easttown?
yes. Cheryl and I kind of burned through it in, I think, a couple days after it finished airing.
That is how to watch it. I don't wanna say I made the mistake because I don't know that it was totally wrong, but I think there are 7 episodes of the series, and I watched the first 4 or 5 all in a row, and then had to wait week to week for the last couple. And that was probably the worst way to watch it because it wasn't building, but it wasn't instant. Anyway, I got through it. This is not about my bad decisions. This is about talking about Mayor of Easttown. So in this, Kate Winslet plays Mare, who's a divorced cop who lives with her mother and her daughter, and she's raising her grandson. She's handed she's haunted by this case of a girl who's been missing for about a year. Someone in her community she hasn't been able to find. Um, a second girl is found murdered, and suddenly everyone is a suspect. There's mysteries, there's deceit, there's shadiness. Every episode you walk away going, "Oh, I know 100% that person is guilty," and then the next episode just blows everything out of the water. The cast is amazing. In addition to Kate Winslet, it's got Jean Smart as her mother and Evan Peters, who I have a real kind of fondness for the roles that he picks. Just really great. But it's kind of like Twin Peaks meets Big Little Lies is how I'm going to describe it. It's kind of obvious anytime like the show opens with the body of a teenage girl, you're going to get a Twin Peaks comparison, but this sense of everyone's got these secrets that they're protecting and hidden lives that are being uncovered, and it's awkward, and just I loved the series. I really, really liked it. So I think people should check it out.
Yeah, that Twin Peaks comparison is pretty good, but I just want to say, just in case there's people who have seen Twin Peaks, it's not like weird like Twin Peaks can be.
That's
So
true.
hope that doesn't like I don't want to turn anybody off from the show, because it is really good. So Caroline, you talk about like you watched like the first 4 or 5 episodes, then you waited to see the last few. I remember talking to Cheryl at the end of like one episode in particular, which I won't say because it'll spoil stuff, but I remember that episode ends and I turned to her and I was like, aren't you glad we didn't watch this live? Like we would have had to wait like a whole week to find out what's going on. So I'm actually doing that right now with the TV show Dr. Death, which is really good, and I'll probably talk about it during a later episode. But I'm watching it live, and I'm just like, oh, I should have just waited, recorded them all, and then watched it afterwards. But yeah, getting back to Mayor of Easttown, it's an incredible show, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites that have come out this year.
Speaking of Dr. Death, anytime you want to do a Joshua Jackson episode, I am here for that.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
Well, it's funny because I assume you would mostly want to talk about Dawson's Creek, which I have never seen a single episode of.
I haven't either.
I mean, that would be part of it, but there's more to his career than that.
Yes.
Plus his adorable new young family, right? Like there's lots to talk about there.
Mhm.
I would just want to ask him about the Mighty Ducks movies.
Oh,
we would have everything covered. We should. Joshua Jackson, if you're listening, we would love to have you on.
So you mentioned Dr. Death, but I'm guessing that's not what you had planned to talk about, Bryce.
No, I'm going to save that for another episode once I'm finished watching it. But this week I actually have a book recommendation, and my book recommendation is Yearbook by Seth Rogen. Have either of you had a chance to check it out yet?
No, but I've heard it's quite funny.
Yes, it is. So I actually borrowed the audiobook, and it's read by Seth Rogen himself. I haven't listened to a ton of audiobooks. Probably I've only really started listening to audiobooks since we started doing the show like a few years ago. Probably my favorite audiobook I've listened to. It's just, it sounds like Seth Rogen is just basically telling you these coming of age tales of growing up in Vancouver and going to Hollywood and, starting his stand-up career as a teenager. So he's got all these different stories that kind of obviously lead up to him being, making it in Hollywood and everything, and some really, really funny kind of Hollywood stories about meeting, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and trying to set up the Green Hornet movie. Is somebody who also obviously grew up in Western Canada. He has a whole chapter where he talks about going to eat at Bonanza with his family. So Medicine Hat, Bonanza was the place to go for a family meal. So his dad apparently was obsessed with Bonanza. So I was listening to that and chuckling to myself as I listened to it. But yeah, it's the whole book is hilarious. So if you're looking for something that, is funny, and it's also very heartwarming as well. There's chapters where he talks about how his grandparents were huge influences on him and his comedy, and how he met his wife. So it's just a really, if you're looking for something kind of short and funny to read, this is a great book. And I recommend borrowing the audiobook version, but if you can't get that one, uh, yeah, ebook, whatever you prefer, you'll enjoy Yearbook. So I have a feeling I'll probably be talking about it again during our best of 2021 episode.
I've also started thinking about that episode. That's kind of scary to think that we're almost there. There's something great though about celebrity audiobooks, particularly celebrity memoirs, where they're telling these kinds of stories and they're narrated by the celebrity themselves. When you're listening to it, there is an intimacy to it where it
Mm.
does feel like it's you and them. I remember listening to, I think it was Is Everybody Hanging Out Without Me, the Mindy Kaling book, and it really was like I would be in transit and it was like Mindy Kaling and I were just like riding around the bus for the day and she was telling me all these funny stories.
So today we're talking about things we're thankful for. And obviously, as we mentioned, Thanksgiving is just around the corner. But let's get into it. I assume we all have our like early Thanksgiving meals in front of us. I've got a cooked turkey here and some stuffing and buns and everything. So before we eat, let's share what we're thankful for. So I'm going to start though with movies. So we always love talking about movies and TV here on Overdue Finds. So what are some things that we're thankful for when it comes to movies or TV? Katie, how about you?
Well, one of the things that I'm extremely thankful for, and it's actually already come up in what we've been talking about, is this shift to how we watch TV, and the move to TV that's being written to be binged. And you can tell difference between TV that is made now when you watch it. You can tell that that's part of the process and what they're anticipating. Whereas if you binge something that was made, in the 90s or before, that's when if you're watching a sitcom, all of a sudden you're going to get like a flashback clip episode, but you just watched all those episodes because you're binging, and it didn't anticipate the way that we watch TV now. But one of the things I'm thankful for is that we have the opportunity to, take Mayor of Easttown out on DVD, which, sidebar, I didn't realize that we had it already in our collection, and I placed the hold while you were talking about it. And then you can watch the whole thing at once. Related to that, I'm also thankful for, and this sounds self-serving, but it's just true, for the things like this that we have on DVD at EPL, because I can't possibly subscribe to all of these different streaming services, and so this just makes me so happy when something I really want to watch, I can still get it on DVD and watch it from the library, and I don't have to have a dozen different streaming services.
I think that's a really great point. And yes, I mean, obviously, we here on Overdue Finds are pro library, but we really are because we did a whole episode on stuff that was not on Netflix. And
Yeah.
we expanded that to some other streaming agencies. And even this week, I was looking through Canopy and found movies that I've been trying to find, but they're not on Netflix or they're not on something else. But then, in addition to that, providing access to the texts of the day, which for this moment includes limited series on HBO.
Yeah. And I think part of what I love about this shift to binge watching things is it almost moves the experience more similar to like reading a book than watching a movie, because you can have much more expansive story and character than you can in a 2-hour movie. But you get that immersive experience, when you're watching them back to back to back, over a couple of days or whatever. It feels more the way it does. When you're reading a book, and even when you're not holding it and reading it, you're kind of always reading it for the time from when you first read it to when you finish. It's happening in your mind and you're in that story. And binging TV feels much more similar to that than when we used to watch a weekly release. And I had a similar experience to you when I watched WandaVision, where I didn't watch it from the beginning, so I could binge sort of the first half of it, but then I had to wait for weekly releases, and it just I was like, what? When did I go back to the Stone Age? This is not how I watch TV anymore. It was so yeah. It's. I mean, I have lots of individual shows I'm grateful for too, but that shift I really enjoy engaging with uh, texts, which are actually shows, in that way.
Caroline, how about you?
This is not a surprise. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I am thankful for documentaries. Last week, I talked about Street Gang, and I want to give that a plug again. A fabulous documentary about the origins of Sesame Street. I've been thinking a lot about the people who were involved with it, and even talking about Michael Landsberg, like we were at the top. It's part of the documentary in that, without giving too much away, talks about, the interior life of some of the creative people behind the scenes on Sesame Street, and what their lives were like, and how they were able to put the show together as a creative outlet. It was just a wonderful documentary that I really enjoyed. I've talked in the past too about, I think, Helvetica, which was a documentary, the kind that, it's almost like a cliche to be saying like, oh, I just watched a fabulous documentary about fonts, and people may be thinking that that wouldn't be interesting, and I thought it was. I think other people do as well. But what I took away with that one was how it opened my eyes to something that's all around me, and being aware of the prevalence of, in this case, the Helvetica font, and how it's used and why it's used and where it is. But just this sense of using something like a documentary to understand my world a bit better. And that's what's also done in more personal stories. One of my favorite movies is Stories We Tell, which is Sarah Polley's documentary about her family and secrets that they had. Sarah Polley, you might know from her child acting days of Road to Avonlea, or the Ramona series, or The Sweet Hereafter as a teen slash adult. She's now an actress director, and she has this fantastic documentary that explores her mother's life, and secrets that affect who Sarah is now, and it's done through interviewing her family members on camera, and just talking about what everyone knew to be true, and how truth changes in some circumstances. Very similar to another documentary that's on Canopy called 51 Birch Street, which starts out with a filmmaker exploring his parents and trying to understand who his parents were, and the way he understands them at the beginning of the documentary is not what it's like by the end. And as I was watching 51 Birch Street, I remember going, why am I watching this guy's story? Because he's a filmmaker. He's not a celebrity. He's not like Seth Rogen or Joshua Jackson on here. And I want to know more about him. He's just a guy, but he's exploring these truths about identity and family dynamics, and you just get really into it. So I love the window that documentaries provides, and there's a bunch of great ones at EPL.
Even windows sometimes into your own experiences, like not just documentaries, but I find sometimes movies and TV, if it's something that we were talking recently, Caroline, about the time traveling feature, and you watch a show that took place um, 20 years ago, but you lived through that, and all of a sudden you recognize all the clothes and you recognize all the music, and you have this time traveling effect. Sometimes you end up with this window into your own experiences as well, which I love, and a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, it can kind of be like music. I know, some people will listen to certain pieces of music and it'll take them back to certain times. And yeah, there's definitely been movies that I've watched, and yeah, it takes you back and kind of makes you relive certain moments of your life.
Yeah. So, Bryce, what are you thankful for when it comes to movies or TV?
So like right now, actually, it's funny. I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about Canopy because obviously, Caroline, you were mentioning it, and the one thing I've noticed recently that they've done is they've added quite a few movies from some studios like MGM Grand, Warner Brothers. There's some movies that I've always wanted to watch, but you know, with there's no such things as video stores anymore, and sometimes we don't carry all movies on DVD, and some stuff just isn't available on streaming. So there's some movies that I'm really looking forward to watching for the very first time that have always been on my kind of to watch list. That includes War Games, starring young Matthew Broderick, and I know that's set in the very early '80s,
You've
and
never seen that?
never seen it.
Really?
I
Well,
have
Yeah,
to
your moment is now.
I
yeah.
have to confess, I've also never seen it, and when
That
I saw
surprises
it
me
on
less.
Canopy, I had the same reaction. So maybe we'll have a War Games reaction episode coming up.
I
Need to
think
have
so.
some kind of watch along live.
Yeah. And the other one too is a Brian De Palma movie starring John Travolta from the early '80s called Blowout. It's a movie I've also kind of always wanted to watch, and I can stream it right now. And there's other movies too. Some of my all-time favorites that you can stream right now, including a movie I mentioned during our last episode, Oliver Stone's Platoon, set during the Vietnam War, of course. The Coen Brothers movie Fargo is available on there. There's so many great movies in addition to some of the documentaries that Caroline mentioned a few minutes ago. So yeah, I can't recommend that service enough. I know it sounds kind of cheesy coming from a library podcast, but really go check it out.
I mean, part of what it was coming through as I was thinking about what I'm thankful for is opportunity. And I mean, I think I may have mentioned this before, but when in the late 90s, the American Film Institute came out with a list of the 100 greatest movies of all time. And little film nerd Caroline wanted made it her goal. She loves lists. She loves checking things off. She was going to watch all 100 movies on that. There was no Netflix. There was no, I mean, the town where I grew up, we rented movies at the back of the convenience store. So when it came to finding these, I was like held to what was going to be on TV, what was going to be on TV Ontario's Saturday Night at the Movies, and hope that it was one of the ones that matched up with what I wanted to see. And it wasn't until I was able to get to places that had bigger library systems where I could borrow it, or the opportunity to purchase, which is an investment in itself, that it became an easier process where I had more agency in what I could how I could control it. But I mean, I still remember when I first came to Edmonton and saw the movie collection in the Edmonton Public Library, I was pretty thrilled by it.
You're like, finally, I don't have to rent out of the back of a convenience store
Yeah,
anymore.
exactly. Exactly. So, we've talked about movies. Switching over to books, what are some things we're thankful for there? Katie?
I have so many, but my first thing is audiobooks, just quite plainly audiobooks. And Bryce, you said you've sort of recently gotten into listening to audiobooks, and I, in the last 3 years or so, have really shifted to, and especially in the last year or so, to listening to. I read way more audiobooks than I do print books, and I it works well for how I process information. I'm really an auditory learner, and so I remember books better if I listen to them by audio. It fits into my life better. If I can read, while I'm commuting, then I get this time back that I was previously I didn't. was lost to me in terms of being able to read or do something for me in that time. And so I love audiobooks. I love audiobooks that are narrated by the author because I think it just adds this nuance, and actors are terrific, but it's different when it's someone telling you their own stories, like you said about the Seth Rogen or the Mindy Kaling book. I love full cast audiobooks because it's like a radio play. And it's just if you can, there are lists of those, and if you can find those, and they've got a full cast of characters and they've got actors for each of them, so you're not just hearing one person do a bunch of different accents, but I appreciate that too.
When it's done well,
When it's
probably.
done well. But it can make, I've listened to books in audio that I've read in print, and they come to life in such a different way. And I know they're not for everybody, but I am, I love an audiobook.
Do you have a full cast one that you could recommend if somebody was like, I've never listened to a full cast one? What should I start with?
The final revival of Opal and Nev, it's by Donnie Walton, and it's written as if it is a it's a piece of fiction, but it's written as a nonfiction book about this folk music duo, Opal and Nev, and kind of the course of their career and what happened after they broke up, and their story. But it's written as if they're printing transcribed interviews that this fictional author or investigator did. But so when you listen to it, each of these characters, both Opal and Nev, but also their producer and their writer and their friends and various people that were part of their story, are all voiced by different actors, and it's a fantastic experience to read.
Sounds like a book version of Behind the Music.
It is exactly like that, and it's a. I really recommend the book. It's they find themselves, one of their performance turns into a race riot, and so the investigators trying to get into what happened in that event and how it all came to pass. And so there's all of these. It's not just sort of a fluffy pop star music thing, but it gets, the story isn't quite what it seems to be in the beginning, and it's very well done as an audiobook.
I still remember, Bryce, that now was it your first audiobook or just your first romance novel that you read?
It was both. It was both my first audiobook and my first romance novel.
That's hardcore.
Romance in audio is a whole other thing.
Yeah, from local author Jennifer Snow. She was our Capital City Press featured writer at the time. We had her on the podcast. And on that episode I shared with her, I was listening to it on the bus, and there was some parts that got a little steamy, and I had to like make sure. I was like, okay, I'm just hearing this through my earbuds, right? And like nobody else around me can hear it. Probably was blushing while listening to it, but yeah, it was an interesting introduction to audiobooks for sure.
Rolled up to a red light and closed all my windows because I'm just like, this is not something I need other people to hear. And it's not, maybe it's romance or maybe it's something else, but sometimes there's a weird intimacy about, especially if it's a story that maybe it's a person narrating their own story or something, where you kind of feel like headphones is one thing, but blaring this out into the world feels like it's inappropriate somehow.
Katie, you mentioned audiobooks. Did you have another one you wanted to talk about?
I am grateful for when I can judge a book by its cover.
Ooh, go on.
Bold, right? We always say, right, of course, that we shouldn't do that, except we see so many books in a day that there are certain patterns and things that you can look for in a cover to get a really good sense of what's going to be in that book. And I appreciate that. And I get thrown when the cover doesn't match the vibe of the book. And so one example of this is there's a particular genre of romance that is probably closer to romantic comedy than like a true deep romance or like a Bridgerton style historical romance, Regency romance. This is a more like a contemporary rom-com kind of a book. And they all have the same kind of cover, which is this very brightly colored illustrated cover. It's not too detailed. It's like a digital illustration, usually of the couple and a couple other things. And I know exactly what that book is going to be. And I can grab those off a book truck here at the library, off the shelf, off a display, when I'm in the mood for that kind of a for that kind of a book and know exactly what it's going to be, and I really am grateful for that. And it's not just that genre. There's different types of fantasy and different types of mystery and different, especially genrefied fiction, where there are patterns to the covers that are really helpful. And once you start to see those, it can really help you pick your next great read, because it serves kind of as a recommending tool. I like the last book that looked like that. Let's try it again.
It's reading comfort food,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the being able to anticipate is awesome.
Bryce, how about you? What are you thankful for with books?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about comic books, actually. I'm going to shift gears just a bit. When you have movies, you're obviously very limited on how many maybe movies you can have with a certain property, or actors, depending on contracts. Maybe you only get 3 movies, but you want to see more. Well, DC Comics is starting to get pretty smart with this. And what they've recently done is they've introduced 2 comic series, which I'm really excited about and totally want to share. And the first one is Batman 89, and the other one is called Superman 78. So, what's interesting about both of these series is that they take kind of the last, for example, the Batman one. It's a sequel to Batman Returns featuring Michael Keaton, which we never saw on screen. Superman 78 is a sequel to Superman 2 rather than, the Superman 3 that we got that was not very good. So, the Superman 78 one I'm really enjoying because, when you're reading it, you are seeing another performance by Christopher Reeve. You're seeing Margot Kidder. You're seeing Gene Hackman again as Lex Luthor, and they're battling a villain which we've never seen on the screen before in Brainiac. So it's a really cool way to kind of, Katie, what we talked about before, to kind of go back in time a little bit. You get these new stories, and for young readers too, hopefully it gives them a chance to maybe go back and kind of discover these older movies like the original kind of Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batman movies, or the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman movies. So yeah, both those series just recently started. I think when you hear this, the second issue of Superman 78 will be out. It's a limited 6-run series, and I imagine after those six issues are out, we will have that as a graphic novel in our collection. We don't at the moment, but yeah, go and check them out in your local comic book store.
That's cool. I love that when it sort of crosses the boundaries of the media, right? And it's
Mhm.
kind of like the novelization of a movie, but more intentionally, and that continuation of the story. Yeah.
Caroline, how about you? What are you thankful for when it comes to books?
I have to give a shout out to my unreliable narrators in increasingly implausible situations who make one bad decision after another. These are the page turner books. I think I've described them as my lunchtime books because I am so motivated to keep reading because the plot is just hooking me that I make sure to take my lunchtime to read them. Um, Authors like Megan Miranda. I recently read um, The Girl from Widow Hills, which is a story about a woman who, as a child, was at the center of a missing child story that had a happy ending, or did it? And what her life has been like since then, and how she is now processing what is increasingly new trauma in her life as things clearly are not resolved from that original incident. Megan Miranda has a number of books. Like you were saying, Katie, the covers of these are all very similar. You see a lot of blues, you see a lot of greens, and a lot of like fluorescent pink and orange. That's what you get with these. Mary Kubica wrote The Other Misses, Local Woman Missing, which is about a woman who goes missing and the investigation of trying to put it all together. 6 weeks to live. You're poisoned and you got 6 weeks to find out who murdered you before you're dead. Just people making interesting choices that sometimes you want to scream at them, and sometimes you're like, okay, but like go and do it quickly because you want to see what happens anyway. So these are my thrillers that I seem to have been in the mood for the last year.
An unreliable narrator is just so frustrating to me. I guess you're the reader for these and I am not, but I want to get behind the narrator and like follow their story and feel good about them. And when they're making me mad and they're making bad choices or misinterpreting things and you can just see it happening and you can see that they're unreliable, oh, that just makes me so mad.
It makes me upset too, but I like in a way
But you
that I
like it.
want to follow it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about movies and we've talked about books, but let's talk about music. Katie, what are you thankful for when it comes to music?
I have so many things. So many things. I am listening to music almost all the time. I had to turn off my music so that we could have this conversation without like ABBA in the background.
We're
ABBA
sorry
is
we
something
disturbed
I'm
you.
grateful for sure. Yeah. But I'm someone who has a soundtrack all the time. And part of the reason for that, and something I'm grateful for about music, is that it helps me kind of um, moderate my energy and my mood through the day. And so I'll pick music depending on either how I'm feeling or how I want to be feeling. If I need a pick me up, or if I need to calm down, or if I need to focus, I pick music accordingly, and it helps me with how I get through my workday. And at home, there's often music playing too. If I'm not listening to an audiobook, so I am just I'm grateful for music. Period. And
That's
it
really
has some.
interesting.
hmm,
Like, when have you always known this about yourself? When did you kind of put that together?
I've become more aware of it. I would say in the last 5 or 6 years or so. I have a very clear memory before it was on my birthday, and I was kind of getting ready. Some people were coming over, and I was like, and someone told me they weren't coming, and I just felt really down about it, and I was like, "Why do you care this much? Why are you so depressed?" And I was listening to some really lovely but really depressing, kind of folky, sad, and I was like, "This is why." And I swapped out what I was listening to, and it made all the difference. And it was this one really clear memory and one moment where I went, "This has a huge impact on me." Like I really and so then knowing that, I can kind of use that to my advantage. Um but yeah, I love it. I'm dancing or I'm breaking into song, and it's always on in my office, so the staff here at Strathcona know when they come in that they might walk into a dance party at any moment, and that's just the way it is.
There's going to
Um,
be some ABBA blaring from your
Today
office.
it was ABBA. Yeah, today it was ABBA. But it has some of the same quality that we've been talking about, that time traveling quality too, right? And so um, you can really like I can go back to high school, or I can go back to different times in my life depending on what I'm listening to, and you can almost feel who you were in that moment because it was such an important part of your experience of that time was the music of that time. And so it's been really delightful. I have a 4-year-old son, and introducing certain music to him, both kids music or, appropriate, everybody music or whatever it is, and kind of reliving some of my life that way with him has also been something to be very grateful for as well.
I do love when you see a small child and their favorite group is like an adult band. I love that.
Yeah, he's not quite there, and the other day he did tell me to turn ABBA off, so we clearly have some work to do, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Maybe he's similar though with the moods.
It
You
could
know,
be.
he just was in a different mood.
He always is in the mood for Raffi, so he is all about Banana Phone and Baby Beluga and all of those classics. So, we have a lot of Raffi going on in our house.
Caroline, how about you? What are you thankful for when it comes to music?
I am so thankful for the songs that you can just belt out with your whole heart. And I mean, heart would be one of them.
Yes, for
Uh,
sure.
definitely a good belting, a number of really good belting, but
Although they're
whether
hard
it's
to sing, that is a high range. That one, you
yeah.
don't maybe want other people to hear you belting out hard songs.
I don't know that I want anyone to hear me belting out any of these, but that's why I joked when I watched The Bodyguard earlier this year that I hoped my neighbors were enjoying the concert because I can't not sing along with
No,
Whitney
you can't.
Houston.
No.
I mean, I have nothing. Come on, no. I have everything because I have this song. And that's my list. I was going through my list of like my personal favorite songs to belt out. Whitney Houston is on there. Celine Dion, obviously. Um, a more recent favorite, I would say Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball.
Yeah.
It has that. It starts kind of quiet and then that goes big, which is fun when it builds up like
And
that.
it has that triumphant feeling. Like you
Yeah,
just feel powerful when you sing it. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
And Total Eclipse of the Heart, Bonnie Tyler. So
I
Solid
Can I just
song.
barge in here with a memory about that? When I
Mhm.
was in undergrad, I went to school out in New Brunswick. Not that that's relevant. And there was a night that we knew there was going to be a lunar eclipse, and so my entire residence was out on the street in front of the residence, watching this lunar eclipse happen. And someone started singing, and all of a sudden there were like 150 of us watching the lunar eclipse, singing "Total Eclipse of the Heart," and it's like one of my best university memories. It's amazing.
oh, I remember her recently joking of like, "Whoa, why am I trending on Twitter?" And it's because there's an eclipse coming up. So it's a good anytime song on there. You know, it went for whenever you feel like you're living in a powder keg and giving off sparks, for sure.
And who
So
hasn't felt like that, right? Who hasn't?
totally. Totally. And that's why I'm just so thankful for these songs that allow for this emotional release. Yeah. Bryce, are you also belting out songs?
It's funny because I was talking to Cheryl about this the other day. In our vehicle, we have Sirius XM satellite radio, and recommend it if you can.
Not a
But
sponsor.
they are not a sponsor of the show, but if they want to, give us an email at podcast@upl.ca. But it's funny though, because I always find I listen to the same five stations, and all five of those stations all feature some iteration of like music from the 70s through the 90s, and it's like pop or classic rock, mostly classic rock. So because of that, I don't really discover a lot of new artists unless, like, obviously, Caroline, you mentioned something on the show or one of our other guests does. I'm clueless when it comes to new music. So I am thankful for discovering new artists. And one of those new artists, well, I shouldn't say they're new. They've been around, but I'm just discovering them. And that's a Juno award winning all female rock band from Toronto called The Beaches. Are either any of you
Yeah.
familiar with them?
Yeah, a
Mhm.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm clueless. I just heard a song from them the other day, Want What You Got. Great song. And so I was like, who is this group? Did a little bit of digging around, listened to some of their music on YouTube. And yeah, I think they're amazing, and I totally want to go see them in concert if they ever come out here. On their website, they have a coloring book that you can download. But I love their sound. They kind of have this glam rock sound from like the 70s and 80s. So kind of think of like David Bowie or T Rex or something like that. But yeah, Canadian band. So I'm thankful for the Beaches, and I'm glad that I finally heard them.
Canadian music for a long, long time has been really, really strong. And I mean, last time I was here, we were talking about Canadian TV, and we've talked a little bit about how our culture kind of gets lost by the influx of American culture. But um, Canada has long been producing strong music that does have a bit of its own sound and its own quality. And absolutely stands up. Like it absolutely is a great scene across the country and in individual cities too. Edmonton has an awesome local music scene.
Mhm.
Um, Winnipeg is produces so much Canadian music for the size of the city that it is, and of course other hotspots across the country as well. So
A couple things to plug there. One would be our Canadian music episode that we did earlier this year. It came out on or around Canada Day,
Yeah, it was early
and
July. Yeah.
yeah, and we really got into Canadian music coast to almost coast. I think we did a brief stop in BC, but we definitely covered the East Coast for
Yeah.
sure. As well as speaking of the Edmonton music scene, Capital City Records is a
yeah,
great place to find local Edmonton musicians. Some of them newer, some of them have been around for a while on the scene. I know I've found artists and groups there, and that's an EPL initiative that has really grown over the last
yeah.
several years.
It's often what's playing in the background in my office at Strathcona.
Nice.
So let's finish it up with a wild card round. This is your choice, but what's one last thing that you're thankful for? Katie?
I am thankful for what I call the burr months because they're colder, but they all end in burr. And I just think this is the best time of year. And starting in September, October, November, December, it's all good. It's seasonally awesome. It's sweater weather. It's holidays. It's Halloween. It's Christmas stuff. It's back to school. I just think all the best stuff happens in the burr months. So I am always, always grateful for the burr months.
Love that. And Katie, can you just let our listeners know what month your birthday is in?
It's not relevant, but it is also in December. Yes.
I like this. This is kind of like your attempts to take the Burr months, like make it
Yeah. We're
viral,
gonna make it a thing. We're gonna
make it a
make fetch
thing.
happen. Yeah, we're gonna make it a thing. But the Burr months are the best months. I'll stand by that.
I agree with you, Katie.
Thank you.
As I've gotten older, I've become kind of less of a summer person. Maybe it's just because I don't have air conditioning in our place,
Hmm.
but this past summer was disgustingly hot. But
Awful.
yeah, when the leaves start to turn, I'm like, this is the best time of the year.
And this year our fall colors have been gorgeous. I was worried
Mhm.
after such a hot, dry summer that everything would just sort of dry up and turn brown and fall off the trees. But it has been a vibrant autumn so far. It's been beautiful. I've been taking my kid out to throw leaves around, and we've been having a good time of it. So the only complaint I have so far is that it has been a very warm September. I'm hoping that we can get into sweater weather soon. I do love my fall wardrobe, so I hope I can crack it out soon. But yeah, it's a good time of year.
Bryce, what are you thankful for?
I want to actually, we don't do this very often on Overdue Finds, but I want to give a shout out to a local business in my neighborhood here in Riverbend. They are not a sponsor of the show, but Cheryl and I have been living in this area for like, I don't know, 13, 14 years now. And I always joke around with Cheryl. I'm like, I like this neighborhood, but we really need a comic book store. Like, the closest one is in, Old Strathcona or maybe at one of the malls or whatever. But yeah, I want to give a shout out to a new business in Riverbend called Rolling Tales Pop Culture. So they are Riverbend's, really Southwest Edmonton's really only comic book store. They sell comics, role playing games, they do workshops, and they're run by the same team from the original Happy Harbor
Oh,
comics. So they got friendly staff, great selection. Once again, they are not sponsors of the show. This is just me saying I'm just thankful to have a comic book store in my neighborhood. So,
awesome. I
Caroline, how
didn't
about you?
know that they were open down there. That's awesome.
Yeah, just probably about a month now. They just had their grand opening the other weekend.
What I came to, it feels so basic, but really it is sums up a lot of what we've been talking about through today. So I think it's also kind of on theme. High speed internet. I'm really thankful for this. It feels like saying I'm grateful for, electricity and running water, which obviously I am. The but with high-speed internet, especially over the last year and a half, I can have video calls with my nephew. I didn't He was born just over a year ago, and I didn't see him in person for the first year of his life, but we were able to have video calls, and I'm very aware that calling them video calls marks me as an elder millennial person, but I'm okay with that. I can also stream movies and TV, right? And like this, particularly the stuff that either I've enjoyed over my life and want to revisit. Again, that thread of like going back and finding things that you enjoyed at different times or that take you back to a different era. I can watch library programs like the Terry O'Reilly program session we have that we'll be attending tonight. It'll be in the
Mhm.
past if you're when you're listening to this, but the Michael Landsberg one is coming up, and we've been able to continue to have access to these presentations because we can do it at this distance. I can listen to podcasts, we can continue to put this out. All of these things that this connection has allowed for. I'm just really thankful and really grateful for that. And also root beer. I love root beer.
I mean, yeah, that's a good one too.
So I'm just gonna sneak that in if we get a root beer sponsorship. So
That's right.
But there's lots of places in this country where you can't get the kind of internet that we get in
Yeah.
the city, right? Like rural internet continues to be spotty across the country, and when it's there, it's extremely expensive. And so it is something to be really grateful for that we have the access and the infrastructure that we have in the city that allows us to have this.
Yep.
and EPL is a provider of Wi-Fi. That
Yep.
was
Mhm.
something when our branches were physically closed, many of them kept the Wi-Fi on so that people, if they needed it, would be able to be outside in the parking lot or around the building and access Wi-Fi. Because, as things moved online, it became a necessity like electricity and water. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing those stories about people kind of close it, like getting really close to the branch or certain areas outside the branch just so they could get a good signal to maybe send a resume
Mhm.
or just anything that they really need Wi-Fi for. And yeah, it's totally one of those things, like it's so easy, for some of us to take it for granted that we have it. And yeah, it's definitely clearly a very essential service that not everybody has.
Yeah.
And one last shout out, and I think we're all on the same page here. We're very thankful for healthcare workers.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you
100%.
to all of you. I don't know if anybody's listening who's a healthcare worker, but if you are, we really thank you. And anybody right now pretty much works at a hospital. So janitorial, anybody, thank you.
Yeah, and the people who support them in their
Mhm.
lives as
Yeah.
well. Absolutely. Before we get to our roundtable questions, Bryce, can you let everyone know what we'll be talking about on our next episode, which will be available on Friday, October 22nd?
Yeah. So earlier we talked about our next forward thinking speaker series event. And on our next episode, we're actually going to be talking with Michael Landsberg ahead of his talk with us here on November 3rd. We'll be talking with the former host of TSN's Off the Record about his presentation called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me, and his advocacy work on the website Sick Not Week. And of course, his days at TSN. You won't want to miss this episode. Caroline, I'm going to bring it up with him on our next episode. But I've been watching some very awkward interviews he's done with some athletes,
Hmm.
and I've got some questions for him, and hope things don't go off the rails when we're interviewing him and he considers it to be an awkward interview. So yeah,
Maybe we'll have to see if he has any insight into Bob Newhart as well.
maybe I do. I'll be sending you some notes. Actually, I've got a question maybe along those lines for him. So yeah.
I'm
Find
looking forward to that.
find out his feelings on root beer while you're at it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a big one.
So we've got our roundtable questions. The first one, which pop culture family would you like to join for Thanksgiving dinner? Katie, I'll start with you.
I mean, it depends. But okay, I have to answer quickly. The first thing that came to mind, because I think it would be amazing, was the Addams family. Um, I don't know what Thanksgiving looks like in the Addams family household, but I know it would be amazing. So that was my first thought. I also think the Maximoffs from WandaVision would put on, I'm picturing their like Leave It to Beaver style episode, and like the dinner when she had the dinner party, what that would look like in Thanksgiving. But also there's like magic going up, not magic, powers at play, and like a mystery and all of the stuff that came with that. I think that would also be very cool.
I think it would be really interesting too if you were kind of aware that you were in a sitcom setup,
Mm,
because then you could play with that. Like you
yeah,
could.
I was just gonna say, I love the idea of the similar to WandaVision. It's like the boss is coming over for dinner.
yeah,
Everything has to be perfect.
exactly, exactly. And that's such a
Katie's coming over for
trope.
dinner.
Yeah, and it just leads to hijinks. It has to.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's real potential there for a great time. I was thinking too, I mean, when I was here last, we talked about Schitt's Creek, and I was thinking about folding the cheese and all of that. And I thought, I don't know that I want to be at that dinner, but I want to watch that dinner. I had the same thought about the Bluths from Arrested Development. I don't know that I want to be there, but I want to watch that dinner.
Mm.
But I think either something very spooky with the Adams, or something very kind of
Mhm.
traditional hijinks kind of style with the Maximoffs.
I like those. I like those answers. Bryce, I have a feeling we might have the same one, but I'm gonna.
I have a feeling it's gonna be the same one too. When I saw this question, I'm like, we're gonna have the same answer. It, of course, is the Belchers from Bob's Burgers. So
That
anybody
is
who
correct.
watches anybody who watches Bob's Burgers knows that Thanksgiving is Bob's favorite holiday, and all he wants to do is have his perfect bird. He's looking for the best turkey, and it looks like I think there's a couple where we actually do see him finally get his Thanksgiving spread out, and Bob knows how to put together a turkey. So I would love to dine with the Belchers on Thanksgiving, and I would do everything I could to help Bob just make the day go smooth for him.
Plus, Linda is really great at writing Thanksgiving carols.
Yes, that's
So
right.
you got the food, you've got the entertainment. That's that's there. Whenever I do these, this is a very odd pop culture reference, but I always feel like I'm chairing the McLaughlin group. Did you ever watch that on PBS? And
I'm
it
aware of it.
and
But
there
yeah.
would be this like panel, and it was McLaughlin, who I'm blanking on his first name, but he would go around and talk to them, and then he would be like, "The correct answer is," and then I kind of like Katie. I respect and love your answers. The correct answer is Belchers. So sticking on this Thanksgiving theme, what is your favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner? We'll assume it's not the Thanksgiving carols. Katie, what's your favorite
Oh,
part?
it's the stuffing. There is no other answer here.
That's a good answer. Are you strict about the distinction between stuffing and dressing?
Well, stuffing has been stuffed.
So
It's
that's
in
a
the
yes
name.
then.
Yeah.
So what if somebody makes stovetop? Is that considered dressing then?
I think technically you can also stuff stovetop.
Yeah, you could.
So I guess it depends.
We'll
I
have to look
actually
into this.
Yeah.
I actually grew up calling it dressing more than stuffing, because my grandmother makes an amazing dressing that isn't stuffed, but she bakes it in the oven, and it's incredible. And I have tried to learn how to make it, but it never turns out quite right. And so I actually probably grew up saying dressing more than stuffing, but doesn't matter what you call it, that is the best part of the meal.
It is delicious, yeah. Bryce, how about you?
I agree with Katie. It's got to be the stuffing. And my apologies if I offend anybody listening to this. Raisins do not belong in stuffing.
What about cranberries? Have you done it with like craisins? It's better than just the
No,
raisins.
no. I just I don't know if I can endorse that, but I will say, like, if it's me making it, not that I ever do, but if it was up to me, there's no raisins in the stuffing.
Well, there goes our Craisin sponsorship.
I know.
But yeah, no, I think that's good. Listeners, if you have thoughts on what goes in stuffing or dressing, let us know. What's your take on raisins and cranberries? I also love stuffing. So good.
That's
Fantastic.
clearly the correct answer here.
It is the
Yeah.
correct answer.
Yeah.
I mean, every part of the meal is good. Like I love pumpkin pie, I love turkey, I love all of it. But I mean, in the absence of pumpkin pie, I would have another scoop of stuffing for dessert. I wouldn't even hesitate.
My runner-up answer was leftovers.
Yeah, yes.
Particularly when you make it into a little sandwich, and
But then you got to
Good.
make sure nobody steals it out of the fridge.
exactly. Katie, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you
today's
for having me back.
show. Before we let you go, is there anything that you want to plug for our listeners?
No, well, we're really excited about these ongoing adult programs and speaker series that we've been able to move online. A bunch of them used to be hosted at Strathcona, like the archaeology talk and the energy talks. And so the opportunity to make those more accessible, especially through COVID, a lot of our Strathcona regulars have shifted to the online, and we've gained a bunch of new audience for those. So please check out the website for the various speaker series that are being offered. Honestly, there's like a couple every week on different topics and things. So check those out.
Yeah, we'll have a link to those in our item list. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you automatically get new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews, and it's been a while since we've had any. So please add some reviews. And as always, if you like what you hear, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. If you want to share your favorite titles with us or tell us what you're thankful for, or even if you put raisins in your stuffing, email us at podcast@epl.ca or hit us up on Twitter by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.